Welcome back to the Hitting the Turnbuckle podcast. Now, this show was going to be an AEW week in review, like we normally do on a Sunday, but it's Monday at time of recording. But you, the people at home, the listeners, the wherever you watch us, have changed this. I opened up the Hitting the Turnbuckle email box today to have an abundance of questions, predominantly around AEW. So I don't know if we should be thanking Gary Joe and the fans of For the Revolution for it or not. There is some questions from America on there, but anyway. That's now going to be the brunt of the show. We're going to be answering the AEW questions that you've sent in. But for those of you that are not watching on YouTube, you will not be able to see him. But you'll soon be able to hear him, my good buddy, who is suffering from a very real thing called man flu. It is my good buddy, Dave Robinson. Good evening, sir.
Hey mate, okay. It's
Yes.
like
Go
Taboo
on.
Tuesday. The audience have chosen.
The audience have chosen. My friend, I couldn't believe it, honestly. There is so many. Some of the questions as well are absolute belters. Now, full disclosure, I messaged Dave earlier on and I said we're going to do this show about questions, and he said, "Do you want to give me the heads up on the questions?" And I said no. Some of you may feel that's unfair because I get time to think about the questions, but as I do with the interviews, we very rarely tell them the questions unless there's some specifics that they want us to go into. We don't, and we always do a show on one take. So I said to Dave, no, you can answer the questions live like as a guest would. Is that or is that not correct, young David?
That's correct. I have no idea what questions you're going to be asking me and what's coming. I'm suspecting we might be talking about Britt Baker given the news today, but other than that, I haven't got a clue.
Yeah, you are right. That will be a question that's asked later on. But Dave, look, let's get on with it, shall we? The first question was actually Liam from Southampton, in his message, and I don't know whether you've paid this guy off before we even start, but he's got, "Hey guys, really enjoy the show, especially when Adam and Dave are together. You two have a dry, witty banter that always makes me laugh during listening." I don't know, Dave, whether you've paid this guy, but thanks, Liam, for that
Yeah,
anyway.
thank you, Lou.
That's very nice. But he has said, I have a question for you. He said, "So I have a question for you for your next AEW show, which is going to be now." He said, "I've been a big fan of AEW since 2019." He said, "But I fear that they're starting to make the same mistakes as their predecessors, WWE and TNA, by pushing the older ex-former WWE stars, and in brackets, he's got Copeland, Jericho, Christian, and the Hurt Syndicate, and forgetting their core base. And I want to get yours and David's," and he said Gary's because he obviously Gary would normally join us, "opinions on this. So, Dave, are we in danger of AEW making those same mistakes?"
Yeah, I think he's referring to he said WWE. I think
Yeah.
WCW is what he's talking about. Some of
Oh,
the
so he said that his predecessors WCW and TNA by pushing the
yeah
older
WCW.
WWE stars. Yeah.
Yeah, difficult one for me, this.
Mm,
I totally get where he's coming from.
yeah.
And I myself been a huge AEW fan since its inception, since it started.
Yeah.
And recently I have been getting a little bit frustrated with some of the things that's going on and
Yeah.
some of the people we aren't, some of the homegrowns, if you like, that we aren't seeing. Um, yeah, I certainly think it's a balance that needs to be struck. You need to have a successful product that people want to watch, and you need to
Mm,
have stars that people recognize and are going to kind of tune in for. That you want to grow your audience, but AEW aren't doing a particularly great job of growing their audience. I
mm,
think they're keeping the hardcore fan base, such as you, Liam, such as myself, such as Ad, but I don't know how good a job they're doing is in
mm,
attracting new fans, and they've used kind of the WWE stars or the former WWE stars from its inception.
mm.
But we seem to have more than ever at the minute. Obviously, with Shelton Benjamin come in, but I'm really happy that Shelton Benjamin came in. Bobby Lashley, MVP. I think they have added to the show. But there are certain names in the list, such as Chris Jericho, which I'm not quite sure in 2025 whether he should be as big a part of the show as he is. And that does get frustrating for me. Also, when you factor in the money spent on bringing some of these big stars and some of the contracts, Tony
Mm.
Khan has got the money to do that. But my fear is always the effect that it has on the rest of the roster. So the likes of your Daniel Garcias, the likes of your private parties, even some of your kind of the guys now we've seen Penta go to WWE.
Mhm.
Ray Phoenix won't be far behind him. What kind of effect does it have on them when they're originals and they're there from when the company starts and they see these big money signings come in that are on double, triple, quadruple the pay that they're on, and they've really helped to establish the company. So it is problematic. Um, yeah, I'll get your take on it as well. I'm not so sure, to be honest. I certainly want to see more of the homegrown AEW stars and even some of the independent wrestlers that aren't. You know, we've seen Megan Bayne debut last week,
Mhm.
and I thought she looked sensational.
Yeah.
And she's a star in the making potentially for AEW. She's not an AEW original. I know she's appeared on Dark. I'd rather put a bit more stock in those talents than some of the older 50-year-olds pushing 60-year-olds that have had their time in the limelight, if you like.
Yeah, I think like I kind of agree with you. At the moment, I think it's okay, but I do think there's a fine line between it, and they're kind of starting to encroach that line a little bit. And I always go back to like people say what ruined WCW, and they always says, "Oh, when they brought on the Hogans and Nash, the Halls, Macho Man, and everyone like that." And to a degree, they're right because although they revolutionized the business with the NWO and they started the Monday Night Wars, what that did do was allow them to forget their core talent. Benoit, Guerrero, Malenko, to a degree, Saturn, Jericho was one even back then. And WWE took those and, barring Perry Saturn to a degree, made the rest of them megastars. Dean Malenko, maybe not so much, but the others, they turned into megastars. TNA went down that same line. They started like, Christian Cage, prime example, pulled up, but that wasn't too bad. But then it was every time there was a release from WWE, you would expect to see them in the impact zone like the following week or when they're no compete clause. And that was the case. And then what TNA done was the Ken Andersons, the Jeff Hardys, Bobby Lashley, another one they were starting to push them over the likes of AJ Styles, Chris Daniels, Samoa Joe, Kazarian. I said Chris Daniels, but yeah, Christopher Daniels, Kazarian, Elex Skipper, I think at the time was around. So there's a line. And at the moment, like I said, they're okay, but they're slowly beginning to start to encroach that line that I wouldn't cross. So we'll
Yeah,
see. But I think they're okay at the minute. That's where
I
I stand.
think I don't think it's so much as well the big stars because I don't think anybody has really got an issue with Christian Cage, with Copeland. I
Mm-hmm.
think they're doing a good job with them. I'm really looking forward to the Copeland Mox match.
Hmm.
I think that'll be great. That's
Yeah.
something, and I'm really excited to see Copeland in this stage of his career having these matches that I never thought that I'd see him have.
Mm.
Um, so I really can't complain about that. Where I think WCW got it wrong and AEW don't want to make the same mistake. He's bringing in the mid-carders for the sake of mid-carders, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, when I think of WCW's problem, yes, there was kind of the politics and, some of the big stars are on the booking committee and all of this.
Yeah.
But it was when they were bringing guys in like the Nasty Boys and, even Virgil and, uh, you know, Brian Adams. I'm not singling anybody out in particular. I'm just trying to give a few examples of guys that weren't necessarily big stars in WWE. They might have had a decent run for a while, but they weren't the household names of your Hulk Hogan's, your Macho Man Randy Savages, your Diesels, your Razor Ramones.
Yeah.
Those guys, any company at that time would have wanted them. WWE wanted to keep them.
Yeah.
So again, now with AEW, bringing in your Copelands, your Christians, your Samoa Joes, people like that, they really do add a lot to the product. I don't just want it to get oversaturated in the mid card, because then, your younger up and coming AEW stars and your indie stars don't get the breaks. And I think that's AEW has been built on independent wrestling and independent wrestlers and some of those guys that have been day one, competitors for them. So that's, yeah, as you say, a fine line. And the minute they're kind of encroaching it,
Mm.
We don't want to see him fall over the other side.
No, we don't indeed. But good question. Thank you, Liam, for that. First one from America, Raymond, from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And we've touched on it. And he's asked, do you think Christian Cage's gimmick is going stale? He says that he see every week Christian Cage comes out, you know he's going to push the boundary in terms of what he says, but he feels as if that and the patriarchy gimmick, the actual patriarchy team, is really going nowhere apart from the fact that he's got this opportunity to cash in for the championship opportunity whenever he wants. But the question from here, Raymond, is Christian Cage's gimmick going stout? I'll answer it first, if that's okay. For me, no, I don't think so. I can understand it. I can maybe understand it where he's coming from in terms of there is kind of a gimmick already in AEW that does it in a different sense, and that's MJF, and he will go after that sort of low hanging fruit. Christian Cage tends to go after people whose dads are no longer with us or something like that. I get that. But I just think Christian is one of these guys that can reinvent himself at a click of a finger. And I think he's experienced enough to know that if he believes that a gimmick was going stale, he would be able to change it up quite easy. And he did that in AEW anyway, from when he debuted to now. So for me, Raymond, no, he doesn't. But Dave, I throw it open to you.
Yeah, I wish we saw a bit more of Christian, to be honest.
Mhm,
Um, his appearances aren't as consistent as I would
yeah.
like them to be.
Mhm,
But I think the story a little bit derailed by Luchasaurus
yeah.
Killswitch's illness. It is
Yeah.
illness, isn't it, rather
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
injury?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Yeah.
pneumonia.
Yeah.
So I think that's played a part in slowing the story down. I think perhaps we might get some kind of conclusion to the contract relatively soon. I
Yeah.
think that might be tied in with the Cope stuff as well with Mox.
Yeah.
Um, I've got to say, I've really enjoyed this run. I've really enjoyed since he turned heel in
Yeah.
AEW, and certainly since starting the patriarchy, I've enjoyed it. One thing I would really like, because there's a lot of heel factions in AEW,
Yeah.
and I'd like them to kind of separate, look at a little bit different, and I don't just want Nick Wayne and Kip
Yeah.
Sabian just taking losses and beatings for Christian.
Yeah.
I would like to see those guys push on as well, even if it means, having a run with the tag titles or being in that
Mhm.
picture or, something where you can tangibly see the effect that Christian is having on their careers by them
Yeah.
aligning with him. So I think there's some work to do. The patriarchy could certainly be better. Um, but yeah, I don't think it's stale yet, Raymond. I do understand that at times, and perhaps since All In, really, since he's had the contract, that story hasn't developed as quick as we may
Yeah.
have liked. Um, but yeah, I would still stick with it, and I am looking forward to seeing what happens when he does cash in because I think it will be a great moment.
Yeah. I still think he's going to cash in when Copeland beats Mox, and he's going to beat Copeland, and it's going to be him as the ultimate opportunist, kind of beating Copeland at his own game. That's my feeling or theory right now. But yeah, great question. Interesting how people think about this type of stuff. And we mentioned this actually a minute ago. When we mentioned about AEW and viewership. Joe from Preston says, "Hi guys, interesting one here. Do you think that AEW has benefited from the WWE going on Netflix internationally?" He said, "The reason that I ask is that he's read an article which states AEW ratings in the UK have rose significantly over the last few weeks, which makes me wonder if they're benefiting from A, the fans who watch WWE on TNT Sports that don't have a Netflix account, and B, so, or he says, or do you think WWE on Netflix has connected old wrestling fans that now watch AEW on ITV4? What do you make of that, Dave?"
I would certainly like to think that it was the latter
Mhm.
because I think that's great for wrestling. I think that's great for the industry. That's great for the fandom. That's great for live shows. Um, So yeah, there might be something in that. I can certainly tell you from like first-hand experience. I've got a few friends
Mm.
that prior to Raw going
Yeah.
on Netflix, that first Raw,
Mm.
I think that weekend prior to WWE were putting a lot of content onto Netflix,
Yeah.
and a lot of that content was like Attitude Era, late 90s, early 2000s pay-per-views.
Hmm.
And a lot of my friends that know really watch wrestling. Might watch WrestleMania or check in now and again with it. They were binge watching a lot of the stuff that they enjoyed, in their teens and early 20s. So
Mm.
there may well be something in that. I think so. I haven't seen that report,
I have.
unfortunately, about the upturn or
Mm.
the boost in the UK ratings.
Mm.
I think AEW have always had a great UK fan base.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's encouraging and that's good to hear. And as I say, from my point of view, if more people are getting back interested, the lapsed fans, as they're called, are kind of checking out WWE again now it's on Netflix. Because I've watched the last couple of Raws on Netflix, since it's been back, and I've gone through periods. Although I keep up with WWE and what's going on, I don't necessarily watch Raw every week.
Yeah.
But yeah, just with it being on Netflix, I've watched the last 2 weeks. But yeah, people might then be getting like wanting to dig deeper into wrestling and what's going on in the landscape, and you've got Penta coming in, who's come from AEW. So does that mean people have wanted to see what else is going on in AEW? That's yeah, encouraging.
Yeah, when I read the email from Joe, I instantly went on the internet and I have seen it. So I know the ratings are increased over the last couple of weeks, certainly since the Netflix. I like to think it's a bit of both. I mean, look, people that had TNT Sports because they maybe watch football or whatever, and wrestling was on there, and they've still got that TNT account for football. Look, I know Netflix is only 13.99 or whatever, but just some people just haven't got that money to do that nowadays. It is, it's nature of what the economic climate that we live in. So I'd like to think that some fans have thought, well, AEW is on IA before them. Maybe they didn't even know. Maybe they never even heard of AEW. Maybe then they've just seen that there's an opportunity. I know that it's not advertised greatly over here. It's certainly not advertised on like your main like ITV1 that you wouldn't get like an advert. I think the only time they've done it was during the first All In maybe or the second All In
Yeah,
maybe
right.
that
There's
was
a few buses with the poster on, but yeah, that was
yeah.
that was basically around certainly the first Wembley show. I'm not so sure with the second Wembley show.
So I think that may be the case, and I'd like to think also that yeah, people have watched Netflix and were like, or have had Netflix, maybe didn't have TNT Sports, and wrestling becomes available, and all of a sudden they start getting into it, and then either word of mouth or something, or they just flick through the TV guide and here comes AEW, and they're like, what's this? And then they click on that, and then they see the likes of Jericho, Copeland, Christian, and like bloody hell, these guys are all here. These are the guys that I used to watch, back in the day of when I used to watch wrestling. So I like
Yeah,
to think a bit of both, really.
yeah, that ties into as well one of the previous questions about some of the
Yeah.
the older wrestlers, if you like. If there's a WWE fan or a lapsed wrestling fan, and they get into this new WWE product, and you've got The Rock, and you've still got
Mhm.
Triple H part of the show, and other things going on,
Yeah.
and then you hear about AEW, and you see some of those other guys, and then maybe you get back into, or you get back into WWE, and you get into AEW, which again, good thing for wrestling in general. I think ITV, I think Tony Khan has agreed that a further deal with ITV
Yes.
keep it
Yep.
free
Yep.
for the UK for years to come. So
Yep.
I think that's a masterstroke as well. Kind of an obvious. I'm sure it's a more complicated discussion than that, but it's like if that is on the table as a possibility, then you would absolutely go for that, particularly in the UK where wrestling has always been pretty popular.
Yeah, definitely so. Great question. This is an interesting one from Jonathan in Leicester. He said, "Hi team, great shows." Obviously, thanks Jonathan for that. He says, and this may be a bit of an obvious one, really, but I need to talk about it because there has been something announced actually since this email's come out. So I want to talk to you about that as well. He said, "Do you think AEW should partner with Revolution Pro Wrestling for Forbidden Door? I think given the relationship they both have with New Japan, it would make total sense to use all three promotions for the Super Show, especially if Mercedes is still their champ, and of course, as it's over here in the UK. Now, just touching on New Japan briefly, there has been an announcement today. Hang on, I'm just going to read it here. That Japanese pro wrestling has taken a huge step forward. On January the 20th, New Japan Pro Wrestling had led a groundbreaking press conference to announce the formation of United Japan Pro Wrestling, a historic alliance between all of the country's biggest promotions in Japan. New Japan, AJPW, Noah Stardom, Dragon Gate, and DDT Pro Wrestling, and several other major companies have all combined together in Japan. So that's a huge thing. But going back to the question, I mean, I think it's a total no-brainer for me. You've got people there like a Gabe Kidd and Zack Sabre Jr. who wrestle over here in the UK for the independents, and Drilla Mahoney, another one, but ply their trade over in New Japan. And if you're coming over to England for a Forbidden Door event, what better way to do it than to utilize the Rev Pro talent with the AEW talent and mix in some New Japan talent together to create a show? I still think Mercedes, unfortunately, will be the Rev Pro champion by then. And I know they're going to have their anniversary show probably the night before. They generally do that before All In. But Dave, I mean, it makes perfect sense for me for those three to come together.
Absolutely, yeah, and I would say Mercedes having that title, there'll be something in the background already. I think we've seen, was it a Rev Pro show that Orange Cassidy was on last
Yeah,
year?
he was at high stakes. Myself and Rachel were there when he come out.
Yeah, so and I think Sky Blue the year before as well,
Yeah,
a Rev
Jericho
Pro
was at the.
show.
You was at the one that Jericho come out,
Yeah,
yeah.
with Jericho and Sky Blue, yeah. So there's obviously a working relationship there, but absolutely, I would get them involved with the cross branded shows, with Forbidden Door, particularly with Forbidden Door being in the UK.
Yeah.
Absolutely makes sense to get Mercedes to kind of lose the title there. Whether she'll hold it for that long, because thinking about it, is it July or August?
It'd be in August, yes, August bank holiday weekend.
Yeah, so it's a bit of a while for her. And if she is going to hold the title for that long, I hope that she's putting in the appearances at the Rev Pro shows as well. With yeah,
Yeah, none yet, Dave.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, I'd like to see that. If Mercedes is on some Rev Pro shows this year, and
She
then
will be. Yeah,
yeah,
she will
then
be.
she defends the title at Forbidden Door against a homegrown Rev Pro, you know, I think that's a huge.
Kanji or someone like that would be
Yeah,
perfect.
yeah. So, yeah, no, but I mean, we've got the WWE and the TNA official alliance now. It's been going on for a while. That's strong. I think anything that can bolster AEW's partnerships, be that with Japan now that they're combining their promotions. I mean, I know AEW have booked like DDT talent and other
Mhm.
Japanese talent in the past, but having access to that talent pool as well as the best wrestlers in the UK as well, you gave kids, again, your Zack Sabre Juniors, people that compete for Rev Pro, people that compete in Japan. I think that's only a good thing for the company, particularly when you've got these big shows like Forbidden Door.
Yeah, definitely so. I was going to ask that question, but I'm going to go back and ask a different one now because it just kind of goes back to what we've just been talking about, really. Um, Josie from California, another one from California, said, "Is it a mistake AEW not airing Grand Slam live in from Australia?" She's saying, I think it's NBA All-Star Weekend or something like that. But she was saying that just because it's your debut in another country, would you have not have would you have not have made it live for the sake of that in terms of sort of growing that audience and I suppose relationships over in Australia? I need to check that myself, so I don't know if that is the case or what. But unless it's streaming live on Max and it's on TN because he's now changed to like a TBS special, I believe. So it's kind of one of those where if it isn't live, I mean, I don't know. Would better planning maybe? I mean, I don't think the NBA All-Star Weekend changes every year. I don't know that for a fact. I'm not a big American sports star. Andy may have been a better one to ask for that. But certainly, if it's your debut in your country, you're going to want to make it, for that international market and to tap in and to get those relationships. You kind of want to, I suppose, do more. Maybe that's what Joe Cian's saying here, though.
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure on that either. I read that it was on a tape delay and they were
Yeah,
going to play it after the NBA. And the
mm.
hope was there'd be a pretty big lead in for people that
Leading.
were
Yeah.
watching the NBA to then stick around and watch Grand Slam. So I don't know whether it's going to be shown live in Australia for the people who are there or
Yeah, it will be. Yeah.
what. And I'm not 100% sure on the time differences and stuff and what kind of time it would have been on in the States, what kind of time it would be on in the UK. Um, I don't mind it, but yeah, if I was an Australian fan and I couldn't get to Grand Slam to be there in person,
Mm.
I would certainly like to think that it would be on live, because it's a big deal. Obviously, it's their debut in that country. We're going to get, a big match with Tony Storm. You're going to have guys like Buddy Matthews. We're going to have even Harley Cameron, which I'm really enjoying her work. I have done for a while, to be honest. I think what she's doing at the minute is really entertaining. So I think she'll be a big part of that show as well. And if I'm Australian, I definitely want to be watching it live.
Yeah, definitely. So I agree with that fully. We'll see. We'll see what happens come Grand Slam. Someone from your neck of the woods, Dave. Stephen from Birmingham, up in the Midlands, only near you. So maybe you fix his boiler or something. I don't know. He's asked if you think that, or if we think that AEW have dropped the ball with Private Party. He said that since they've won the tag team championships, they seem to have been made a bit irrelevant. He said that he felt that he agreed with the change at the time, but however, since then they've not been utilised to their full potential capacity, as he's put on it. Is that something that you would agree with?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Stephen. I think the way that the tag belts and Private Party have been booked since the titles has been pretty poor.
Mm,
Same can be said about the trios titles, to be honest.
yeah.
This is what I was talking before about the heel factions.
Mm,
Um, for me, and I'll get back to Private Party in a minute, but the Death Riders don't need those trios titles. And I think, have they defended them once or twice, maybe? I can remember there was a defense when Yuta was
mhm.
told, before Yuta was fully, aligned with them and he was still,
Yeah.
before him turning on Danielson. I know they did an angle of would Yuta be there to defend the belts. I can't remember another match after that where they've defended the trios titles. And the same can be said with Private Party. We've had the odd tag match. I think we had a four-way at the pay-per-view with no real story or substance to it. It was just kind of three teams qualified to get an opportunity at the tag titles. Um, After they finished up that feud with the Bucks, and the Bucks were obviously keen to put them over and give them that opportunity to be the top team in the division after being there for 5 years. It just hasn't been followed up at all. And they've got teams there. There's teams that are established. There's teams that just haven't been utilised. Um, I think that the moment is gone though, unfortunately. I think it's just an inevitability now that the next big featured match for the titles, they'll be dropping them, and it will probably be the right thing to do because this not really any fault of Private Party. Just the way they've been booked hasn't really set the world on fire.
Yeah, I agree with that. So unfortunate. I felt as if at the moment, it was the right call to put it on Private Party.
Yeah.
They had that big stipulation at saying if they lost, they had to split up. I don't see them as single stars whatsoever. So to beat the Bucks, I totally agreed with. But yeah, I'm with you guys. I think that they've totally dropped it with them. I don't really. I mean, the tag division is pretty stacked. There's actually a question in a minute from Stephanie, which we'll get to straight after this, which is kind of interesting because it leads on to the tag bit quite well. Yeah, I've been really disappointed with it, and it's not fault of Private Parties. They were with the Hardys, they earned their stripes, they'd been there for ages, they'd got their big win, and then the next thing you need to do is capitalize on that big win, and they haven't done that. And that's not, as you say, that's not their fault. That's booking, and other storylines have come up that have taken over the booking of AEW, and unfortunately, Private Party have not been a part of it. So, yeah, I'm agree with that. I think.
They could have even gone if they had nothing for immediately, they could have gone really obnoxious. They're the ones that beat the EVPs,
Yeah.
really lean into like the rope entrance they do in the
Yeah.
private area. There's a lot of stuff that they could have done there. But yeah, to not do anything with them and have them as a bit of an afterthought. Um, yeah, that's not. I think now I'd like really someone like the Murder Machines to just absolutely destroy them, take the titles, and go on like a dominant run. I think that now is something that's needed, which again does absolutely nothing for Private Party. But I just think there's no way of turning that around for them now, unfortunately.
No, definitely not. And guys, that goes great onto this question from Stephanie. With the Acclaim splitting up, as well as Fletcher and Davis, obviously United Empire, i- is there room for AEW to sign another tag team? If so, who? Or do you think a tag team like the Righteous should benefit? Stephanie, for me, I don't think AEW needs any more signings. I think I think they should pretty much have a hiring freeze. If, however, they was to go for a signing, and I don't know how possible it is, and I certainly don't know how possible it'd be now with all the partnerships, I would have gone for the Rascals from TNA, but I don't think that it's got any chance of happening anytime soon now. But no, I think that you've got the Righteous, you've got like Maximum Male Models, you've got the Outrunners, you've got the Von Erichs that have signed, you've got Dustin Rose and Sammy Guevara. You've got plenty there. Yeah, Action Andretti and Leo Rush as well. I think, yeah, you've got them. There's plenty there. So I don't think there needs to be, certainly don't think there needs to be another signing for the AEW. If they was going to sign a team, I would have thought it had been the Motor City Machine Guns who opted to go elsewhere. For me, I don't think their signing's needed. I just think you use what you got. I mean, Dave, is that something that you would agree? Just push what you've got now.
Yeah, and we've seen teams come in like I'm trying to think of the name. The British guys, Gritty Teeth.
Oh, Grizzled Young Veterans.
Yeah, where have they gone? I think they've been on Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
So that when they came in, they seemed to be like a big deal and a team that AEW were really going to get behind, and they just haven't. So for whatever reason, the tag division, which was such a strong point for AEW in the past, when you think of the Bucks, FTR, Lucha Brothers, even teams like Butcher and the Blade, where you never
Yeah.
necessarily thought they were going to win, they always had good matches. I think it was FTR against Butcher and Blade in the early days, during
Yeah.
the pandemic era, which was a great match. The teams are there, the talent's there. Again, for me, not to keep labouring the same point, but I think Brian Cage and Lance Archer just look phenomenal as a tag team. Um, we're big fans of both of them. We've always kind of advocated for both of them, and so that they shouldn't be the one. They should be on the show more, and they should be losing. Well, they're doing something really right with them at the minute with the Don Callis family, um, and I think to put the belts on those guys would not only raise their stock, but raise the stock of the tag titles, and you're in a position then when you can have tag team title matches, main event in Dynamites. There can be big feature matches on pay-per-views. Whereas at the minute, it's kind of like I know Rampage is gone, but it's
Mm.
kind of like the Rampage titles, or really insignificant and not really part of the main show. Which is again, I don't like saying that because I think Private Party are hugely talented. I think they're pretty good on the mic as well. But this booking of them has been poor, and yeah, it's time to move the belts on, I think.
Yeah, certainly. So we'll see what happens with that. But certainly they don't need anybody else in that
No,
tag
no.
division.
They've
I
got
can't
they've
agree.
got the talent there. They've got between the AW roster, the Ring of Honor roster, people that haven't been utilised as well as they could be. And I think quite rightly when you said about Maximum Male Models, the MXM collection, I think they're a part of that division. I'm not necessarily sure that they're the guys that I want to be like, yeah, they're the tag team champions, and we build the division around them. But they're certainly a part. You know, they're certainly a piece of the puzzle. As are some of the other teams, like the Outrunners. They're incredibly popular, and yeah, I kind of wish they'd have gone with them rather than Private Party now, given what's happened. But yeah, we are where we are. It can be brought back and it can be saved, but I think unfortunately Private Party will be dropping those titles pretty soon.
Yeah, I agree with that for sure. Joe from Vancouver, British Columbia. Here we go, Canadian for us. It's quite a fun one, this. Hi, guys. Can you predict who will hold gold in AEW in 2025? He wants two men and two women for gold. So I'm going to go with two obvious choices and two out there choices. The first obvious choice for the man is Osprey. I think he'll get the championship at some point this year. I'm going to go for the men for the second one. I'm going to go for one. I know he's injured at the minute, but I think he's so exciting. I'm going to go hologram for the second one. For the women, I'm going to again go for a bit of an obvious one in Tony Storm. And then for the out there one, I'm going to go for hologram significant other Harley Graham or Harley Cameron in Richmond. I think she, everything she does is great. She's improving in the ring. Her character works fantastic. We look at Timeless Tony Storm, and then at the other end, you've got this another comedic version of a character in Harley who's trying to do every kind of be sort of every superhero or whatever coming to light. So those are my two each, Dave. I mean, again, I'll throw it open to you. Who's your two men and two women that will be holding gold in AEW in 2025?
So names that just jump out to me straight away. Darby Allin,
Yeah,
just because of the whole story with the Death Riders
yeah,
and taking over AEW, and I'm conflicted about that because I think Darby's is he climbing Mount Everest again at the
he
minute or
is. Yeah, yeah, he is.
do that? So that's kind of come at a bad time in terms of the story and his
Yeah,
wrestling career because I'm sure if it wasn't for that, then maybe we'd be leading to that match a little bit sooner in terms of the world title and Darby being crowned AEW champion. I think that's got to happen at some point. I think Sting may play a part in that still. I know he's retired, but we see him appear periodically, and I think that big moment with the AEW roster hoisting Darby above their heads and Sting in the ring or even on the ramp,
yeah,
I think that'd be a pretty cool moment. So the fan in me really wants that to happen. Um, I was really impressed last week by Powerhouse Hobbs. I've been
yeah.
impressed with him for a long time. And what I was impressed with as well, and I knew he was great on the mic. We've seen him cut promos and vignettes backstage, but I just think he's so much improved from what he was pretty good to begin with, but I just think he's sensational. And they could have put the belt on him last week against Moxley, and I would have been quite happy with that. I would have been, I wouldn't have
Yeah.
been disappointed or thought it was out of place. I think they could well have done that. So. I'll go with Derby and Hobbs,
Yep.
both world title, I think, and I don't know how that would play out, but I think we're only in January, so we've got plenty of
Yep.
time.
Plenty of time.
Those are my two men. Two women. I'd have liked to have said Harley, but I won't piggyback on that. I think perhaps Willow.
Yep.
Uh, yeah, she hasn't been um, such a big part or an important part of the women's division as late, and I think that's a little bit criminal, really. I know everybody can't hold the belt, and I know everybody can't always be in the title picture, but I think Willow is a superstar, and I'd certainly like to see gold around her waist again at some point. And I'm going to say Julia Hart as well, for much the same reasons, to be honest. Two women that have really, you know, done some great work for AEW. Really, oh, in terms of Julia, from where she was, and we've talked about this at length about. She was a cheerleader. She was a valet. She did a cartwheel and chucked some pom-poms. To go from where she was then to where she's now, at still the young age she's at, the presence that she has on screen, um, her ability in the ring, her overall, presentation with the House of Black is something that I've always enjoyed. I think she did a great job as TBS champion, and I think that she'll either be regaining that title or the AEW women's title before the end of the year. So, yeah, Julia and Willow and Darby and Hobbs, or you could say AEW originals or homegrowns to
Go.
an extent.
Go back to the first question that we said earlier on. It's very interesting. Right. Final question, but it's in three parts. This is Shane from Newark, New Jersey. So we've got a New Jersey person. So he said, "Hi guys, great show. Keep up the good work. I have a three-part roster question for you." So, okay. And he says, "Your thoughts on Malachi Black and Britt Baker." This is what you were saying earlier on. And Britt Baker potentially leaving AEW. For me, I think it's positives if they do. Malachi never looked interested, and Britt seems to cause more trouble than she's actually worth. So, part one, Dave, what do you make of that? And your thoughts on them both leaving?
Yeah, I think, and again, just like most of us, it's just suspicion. It's by no means a fact or true. It's just perhaps my interpretation or my perception.
Hmm.
Um, I think if the Vince McMahon stuff would have happened a little bit sooner and Malachi was still at WWE with Triple H going into the creative role and being basically in charge, I don't think he would have ever left. Because I think his relationship with Triple H and NXT and everything that he achieved there, um, I think Triple H thinks highly of him.
Mhm.
To a degree, you could say the same about Adam Cole, maybe. I'm not sure. I know there was different reasons, funnily enough, because part of that reason is Britt Baker. Um, yeah, I think. it's only natural that Alistair Black, Malachi Black, Tommy End would be thinking that he was a little bit of a victim of timing.
Mhm.
As much as I enjoyed his debut, he came in, it was a shock moment. He hit
Mass, wasn't it?
the Black Mass kick on Cody
Yeah,
and on Anderson, wasn't it?
yeah,
And that was a great all-time moment for me for an AW. And some of the matches he's had, the trios matches, and his involvement, even the match with Copeland, I thought was pretty good.
yeah,
Um, I don't think he's had a necessarily bad run, but I could understand why people would say that is he interested? Is his heart in it? Does he want to be there? We see him in spats, don't we? We see him
yeah.
appear for a few weeks and then he disappears for a month, and I don't know the reasons behind that really. I don't know if that's just the way he's booked, whether it's the way he's contracted. I don't know, but I wouldn't. It wouldn't be the end of the world for me if he went back to WWE.
Yeah.
As a WWE fan as well, I'm interested to see what Triple H would do with Malachi or Aleister Black back in the WWE.
Mhm.
And I think AEW have got plenty of other talent that can step up. It would be a
Yeah.
loss for the company, of course, but yeah, I don't think these kind of lingering doubts do anybody any favour, the company or the performer. Um, do you want to talk on Malachi before we go on to Britt or?
Yeah, I was going to say I thought that Malachi was shoo-in for AEW. I thought that everything he done suited the company. I was expecting big things from him. I don't. I think kind of the thing that I think got me was he's been rumored for leaving for years.
Yeah,
And I kind of expected that the moment Triple H got the book is when this all started. I think there was a bit of tampering, wasn't there? It was all reaching out to talent and perhaps he thinks that going back to Triple H will be fine. But I look at this and I say that Triple H, although he was down in NXT, he still hasn't got one call up right. I mean, Carmelo Hayes, nothing. He brought Andrade back, nothing. I mean, they had a best of seven series, but other than that, he's been on WWE Speed. So it's kind of, I, I don't, I just don't think it's going to be the right move for him, assuming that he's going back. I mean, that's the other thing. We have to make an assumption that he is. I just think it's a bit, and I kind of agree with Shane here in terms of, I never thought he looked interested enough in AEW. And again, that just is a perception thing. That's, just a gut feeling that you get. And like you say, when you get suspicions when guys are there one week and not there the next, and that kind of brings me on. And I'll start with the Brit thing to Britt Baker. Like, I know she had an injury. I know she split with Adam Cole personally outside. That's all come to the come out in the open now. But it seems as though in the women's side of things, whenever there's controversy, the same name keeps coming up, and that's Britt Baker. And in my opinion, if you've got quote unquote bad eggs or eggs that cause shit backstage, and maybe Malachi is the same, I don't know, then Tony Khan is every right to get rid. I mean, assuming again with Brit, we don't know. That's the story that's come out, today as such. So we don't necessarily know if that's true or not. But in my opinion, if there's any negative eggs or bad eggs in that locker room, see you bye. That's what's my view on it. What do you make on the Britt Baker issue?
yeah. See, I listen to Busted Open quite frequently, and Thunder Rosa is one of the hosts.
Yeah.
And at times she's talked about Britain. I know it's wrestling, and they had a huge kind of rivalry and big match, but there's always seemed to be something a little bit more than a wrestling storyline going on in the background, something simmering in the back. I think we saw what was that program called, the AEW Unleashed?
Oh, yeah.
Like
I know
that.
the one you mean, but I can't remember what it's
It
called.
was
Yeah.
like a behind the scenes
Yeah.
documentary series. It only ran for 6 episodes or
Yeah.
one season, I think.
Yeah.
Um, and again, you don't know how much he's kind of created for the audience or for dramatic
Mhm.
effect, but it certainly appeared that there were issues with Britt Baker and some of the other women wrestlers there, and that's a narrative that's continued over the last few years. Um, I don't think anybody's necessarily come out and said that they don't like her or anything like that, but I think there's definitely that feeling that
Mm.
some of the women would rather she wasn't there, which again is totally an uneducated opinion of mine. It's just from what you read and some of the things you pick up on. And again, what happened with Thunder Rosa, I think Thunder Rosa was quite kind of heavily criticized
Yeah.
about being injured and she should still be competing even though she's injured. But she broke her back, man. And how can like
You can relate to that.
after having two slipped discs, mate, I couldn't get out of bed, let alone wrestle. So and she was going through hell enough as it was, and to have some of the other women come out, namely Britt Baker, say that, she should be here, she's the women's champion, she should be kind of wrestling injured. Again, I wasn't sure how much of that was real and how much of it
Mhm.
was, playing on their feud.
Yeah.
Um, Last point, I suppose, on Malachi. I've often thought that I suspect that the creative with the House of Black has all come from him. In terms of this is what I want to do. I want this faction. I want Brody King. I want Buddy Matthews. I don't think he needed to do that. As much as, it sounded good and we've had some good trios matches, I think we've seen all three guys in singles action and they didn't really need to be in a. There was no need for any House of Black, was there? I mean, so I think that's kind of hampered him at times as well. He could have been a standalone star for AEW in the main event scene. And again, we've seen him have the occasional big match. We've seen him against Cody. We saw him against Copeland. But more often than not, he's been in tag matches or trios matches. So again, there was an opportunity for him to be the guy in AEW. And given the faction, that kind of went against him, and to a degree, the same with Buddy and the same with Brody. So maybe Malachi's own creative genius, if you like, or his creative input has actually gone against him in the long term. I don't know.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll find out what happens. We need to make sure they're both true, of course, first, but that's one question. But we covered one bit off there for Shane. The second question, do you believe that TK should now fully enforce the roster split to give everyone TV time? He says his thing is that there's so much great talent on the roster and it needs to be showcased weekly. So do you think, Dave, that having a roster split, Dynamite, Collision, Ring of Honor, and it be a hard split as such, do you think that that would benefit from that in terms of giving the guys the TV time that they deserve?
Yeah, I certainly think um, if they stuck with it, and were consistent, these guys are on this show, these guys are on that show. In order to see a Hangman Page, you've got to watch Collision every Saturday.
Hmm.
I think that could be something that has got legs, to be honest.
Hmm.
Um, they kind of did it to begin with when Collision were getting it. I know it's a new show and you had CM Punk, but you kind of had the House of Black FTR, you had Punk all on Collision. You had guys like the Bang Bang Gang, you had some of
Yeah.
the Luchadors. So yeah, maybe that's something worth exploring. They've certainly got the talent to do that. Um, Again, it's not so much with AEW. In fact, like this week, for example, or last week, we saw a continuation of the feud with the Death Riders and Hobbs
Yeah.
going Collision. So you had like the main event of Dynamite, and it was also wrapped up with the main event of Collision. Um, I don't know if that's better than just not seeing Hobbs on Dynamite and then not seeing him for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I'm kind of glad that they followed it up so quickly and they had Hobbs looking dominant at the end of Collision after getting screwed over at the end of Dynamite.
Hmm.
So there's an argument for both. There's an argument for both. But yeah, given the depth of talent and given the amount of title belts they've got as well, there's certainly a strong argument for a brand split. But we've seen with WWE, we always draw the comparison because what else do you compare it to? But like with the Raw and SmackDown split, we saw it work particularly well at times, and we saw it work particularly poorly at times. So yeah, there's an argument for both.
Yeah, I think it needs to be done. I just think it needs to be done correctly, making sure you even up both rosters, not have a one used to be. I mean, you mentioned WWE there. Raw used to have the superior part of the draw, and SmackDown because it wasn't live used to get the bad part of it. Perhaps maybe again. I mean, they're doing a quote unquote transfer window at the minute. I don't know how that's going to pan out yet, but they could be doing that. That could work in against SmackDown's favor with Raw being on Netflix. But I think as long as he does it correctly and he evens it all out, then I think it's needed personally. I
Well,
mean, where's Jack Perry been since?
yeah,
I don't know. Is he injured? I don't know.
kind of wrapped up with the Elite being off
Away.
TV. Yeah,
Yeah. I don't know, but I think he needs it done. I think it definitely needs to be done. And then the final part of his question, which is the final question of our show, do you? And this is an all-round question. This isn't necessarily just AEW. He's put here. He said, thoughts on an all-women's show. Do you think wrestling would benefit from an all-women's show? My take on it is, and we're big advocates of women's wrestling on here. I know. I think that we talked earlier on about there's lines, and we said about AEW, and they're kind of getting to a line where they've got to be careful with the older guys and not putting the newer guys over and whatever. I think with this is that there is a line, and like if you're going to do a women's show, only show, do you then take the women off the show, the other shows permanently? So the show strictly men and the show strictly women. And then does that create then a proper divide? We're talking about equality and having men and women doing the same thing at the same time and not having any, differences or anything like that. For me, having a women's only show and having a men's only show kind of makes that gap wider for equality. Having a women's only pay-per-view might work, but I just think we've got to be careful that we're not separating them entirely, and perhaps maybe making half a show about the women's division and half the show about a men's division. I think that's more where they should be going rather than separating the two.
Yeah. See, I think AEW have got so much talent, and like WWE and like
Mhm.
most big companies, they could do an all women's pay-per-view.
Good. Yeah.
But whether they should is another matter. If I'm going to an AEW show, as much as I'm an advocate for the women's wrestling, if I'm going to one AEW show a year or a pay-per-view that's in my home city or state in America, I want to be going and seeing a bit of everything AEW has to offer. What I would be kind of open to doing is an all women's episode of Collision or an all women's episode of Dynamite. You could call it Ladies' Night. You could have some really hot feuds going into it. A few months worth of build of that involve 8, 9, 10 different women. You could have a big return. You could have some stipulation matches. You could certainly do that as a bit of a test to see how successful that is and how the audience reacts to it. Yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily go with an all women's pay-per-view. Again, we've talked about it for a long time,
Mhm.
and what we've wanted to see is some of the things that have happened recently. Like we got the casino gauntlet, and we had a women's casino gauntlet a
Yeah.
week after men's um casino gauntlet. We want the women to have the same opportunities as the men. We don't
Yeah.
necessarily want the women to have. Oh, it's difficult because the men have had you
Yeah.
know, historically, you know, it's like in football, like in a lot of sports, the men have had the rub of the green, if you like, or they've had it all one way, and it hasn't been equal, and it has been unfair. So I don't know whether you correct that by saying, okay, now we're going to do all women's shows because in the past we did all men's shows. I
Yeah.
don't think that's the answer. I think the answer is to incorporate the women and all, not just women, minorities, different divisions, different size competitors, whether it's men, women, heavyweights, cruiserweights, you know, every element of pro wrestling that is popular that people like, it should be like a buffet. It should be like, here is a collection of everything we like about wrestling packed into one show. And
Yeah.
I can honestly say in 2025, women's wrestling is a huge part of that for me, for a lot of people. And the way it was presented in the past, I probably wouldn't have looked at myself 20 years ago saying this, and I'd be like, well, that can't be true because of the way they were presented. I didn't think I could enjoy women's wrestling the way I do because I'd never seen it until recent years, the way that it can be done. And I think NXT have got a huge kind of part in that. I know Sasha's not your favorite, Mercedes, but people like Bailey, people like Charlotte, people like Becky Lynch, people now like Jordan Grace and, some of the trailblazers in AEW, the Britt Bakers, the Thunder Roses, the Willows, they've all played a huge part in this. And I think, yeah, in 2025, it's not a case of having a women's only show. I think we have the best possible show with as many different types of performer as possible on that show.
Indeed. What a way. What a great show, David. The last hour we've spoken about fan questions, which is so nice. We don't get a lot of them. So this was great to have 6, 7, 8 of them. It's been great chatting. We will obviously be back with the usual return, the usual review shows this week as planned as normal. But as I said, this was meant to be a review show, but you guys, the listeners, the people emailed us with questions that we just wanted to answer instead of that. So we thank every single one of you guys for that. Coming up soon on the show, this man, those of you that know who that is, Mr. RVD will be joining us soon. We've got some independent
You've done well
showcases.
there, mate. I bet you've done well with that one.
I've done 5 star there, my friend. Five
Yeah.
star with that. But yeah, coming up, obviously, we've got some independent showcases still to drop this week. Review shows are back as normal. Me, Dave, we're probably back on Sunday, I would have thought, to actually doing it an AEW stuff this coming weekend to review Dynamite and Collision and everything else. Saturday night's main event, of course, returns this week for WWE as well from Austin, Texas, this coming Saturday as well. Shawn Michaels officiating a contract signing between Kevin Owens and Cody Rhodes ahead of their ladder match at the Royal Rumble. But Dave, it's been great as always to have you aboard. We'll see you again this coming Sunday. Guys, follow us at HTT Buckle on Twitter, HTT Buckle on YouTube, Hitting the Turnbuckle Podcast on Instagram. And until next time, everybody. Oh, no. I'm not finishing this. Sorry, this is still AEW. This is still AEW. I know you got Man Flu, man, but you end it. Go.
It's time to bid you all adieu, goodbye, mwah, and good night. Bang.